What if I told you that Brexit isn't over yet? In fact, it's about to get a whole lot more complicated and frankly, a bit spicy. And that's right, folks, buckle up because it's crunch time for the great Brexit reset. To fully appreciate the magnitude of this moment, let's quickly rewind. Back in June 2016, the United Kingdom voted narrowly but decisively to leave the European Union, marking the start of a long, arduous journey filled with bitter debates, political turmoil, and economic uncertainty. Theresa May struggled for years to strike a deal with Brussels, only to see her efforts repeatedly fail in Parliament. Then Boris Johnson, with his signature bravado, famously promised to get Brexit done, and technically he did. But done turned out to be more complicated than anyone anticipated, leading Britain into ongoing negotiations over trade, borders, immigration, and fisheries. Fast forward to today and we see Keir Starmer, now Prime Minister, grappling with the fallout and promising British voters a sweeping reset of Brexit relations. And this reset isn't merely symbolic, it's practical, vital, and loaded with potential repercussions for both the UK and the EU. And this week, British negotiators are locked in an intensive face-off with their EU counterparts ahead of the high-stakes May 19th summit in London. Starmer, who once assured voters he'd press this Brexit reset button decisively, is now learning just how tricky that button is to operate. At the heart of these negotiations is a proposed defence pact between Britain and Brussels. Why a defence pact? Well, ever since Donald Trump's presidency rattled transatlantic alliances, Britain has felt the uncomfortable gap left by strained relations with its historical ally, the United States. And Starmer's vision is to secure Britain's strategic interests by joining forces with the EU, thus tapping into an enormous 150 billion European rearmament fund that could greatly benefit British defence contractors. Sounds straightforward, right? But as always, there's a catch. The EU isn't in the habit of handing out freebies without extracting significant concessions in return. Top of the EU's wish list is easier cross-channel visas for young Europeans and long-term fishing rights in British waters. Fishing, you might recall, has long been a sensitive Brexit flashpoint. After all, Brexit supporters campaigned vigorously on reclaiming British waters. Any hint of surrender here could ignite fury at home. But let's delve into immigration first. Immigration control was arguably the loudest rallying cry for Brexit, and Starmer, keenly aware of this, has carefully navigated around the EU's demand for a youth mobility scheme. This scheme would significantly ease restrictions for young Europeans travelling and working in Britain. However, Labour's poor showing against Nigel Farage's Reform UK in recent local elections underscored how politically volatile migration remains. And Starmer's compromise? To appease both sides, he's proposing a cap on numbers and limiting stays to 1 year, ensuring these young Europeans won't significantly impact UK migration statistics. Yet Brussels is holding firm, insisting on a minimum 2-year stay. Further complicating matters, the EU is pushing hard for British universities to restore lower tuition fees for European students. London, however, remains stubbornly opposed, fearing domestic backlash. And now, onto the fishing drama, a saga worthy of its own Netflix series. In 2021, Boris Johnson traded generous fishing access in UK waters for a comprehensive trade deal with the EU, setting an expiry for June 2026. Now that deadline looms, and Paris, backed by powerful French fishing interests, demands long-term guarantees. French fishermen have openly threatened to derail the summit if their terms aren't met, leaving Starmer walking a very tight rope. Can he realistically grant continued access without being branded a traitor back home? Probably not, especially with Farage's populist Euroscepticism lurking in the background. Fishing Minister Daniel Zeigner recently vowed in Parliament to fiercely protect Britain's maritime interests, setting the stage for an epic showdown. The diplomatic dance grows even more intricate when considering Britain's desires to ease cross-border food trade and simplify electricity imports and exports. Each negotiation point is intricately linked, and creating a diplomatic web so sticky, even seasoned diplomats struggle to navigate it. EU member states, eagerly awaiting concrete details, are growing impatient. A recent delay, reportedly due to Starmer's decision to withhold details until after the local elections, has added to the mounting frustration. But let's dive even deeper into history to truly grasp how we arrived at this crunch moment. Since joining the EU in 1973, Britain had always maintained a somewhat turbulent relationship with Europe. From Margaret Thatcher's legendary rebate battles in the 1980s to Tony Blair's pro-European stance that paradoxically never led to adopting the euro, the UK's European journey was full of contradictions. And then came David Cameron, who promised the 2016 referendum as a means to silence Eurosceptic voices within his own party, a gamble that spectacularly backfired. Following Brexit, Britain has faced unprecedented economic challenges, trade disruptions, labour shortages and supply chain issues exacerbated by the COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine. And the economic impact has been soaring food prices, labour shortages across sectors like agriculture and healthcare, and reduced economic growth forecasts. And Starmer's reset seeks to stabilise these issues and redefine the UK's economic and diplomatic footing in a post-Brexit world. Moreover, Britain's future economic resilience hinges significantly on these negotiations. Failure to secure favourable trade conditions could exacerbate inflation, disrupt supply chains further, and diminish investor confidence. Conversely, a successful summit might boost economic stability, restore public confidence, and pave the way for deeper cooperation with Europe, benefiting sectors like finance and tech to agriculture and manufacturing. So what are the stakes? If Starmer yields too much to Brussels, he'll hand Farage and other critics ammunition to brand him a sellout. If he stands too firm, Britain risks further isolation from its largest trading partner, potentially causing more economic harm. EU negotiators, facing immense pressure from the member states, are equally unwilling to blink first. The situation is essentially a high-stakes game of diplomatic chicken. But despite tensions, both sides sense there's a path to agreement, a landing zone, as diplomats cautiously call it. However, landing safely requires meticulous negotiation and strategic concessions. Misjudge one move and the fallout could last decades. And this summit isn't just another Brexit chapter, it's a historic crossroads. Starmer faces defining choices that will either stabilize UK-EU relations or plunge Britain back into Brexit chaos. And the EU must similarly decide how hard it can push without destabilizing an already fragile relationship. But will Starmer's Brexit reset live up to its promise? Or will the complexities of migration, fisheries and defence leave him politically stranded? The clock ticks relentlessly toward May 19 and every second counts. So stay tuned, because this story is far from over. Like, subscribe and hit that bell icon to ensure you don't miss any developments. And as always, thanks for watching Outside Views. See you next time, and the next video is already right here in the end screen.